talking about the coalition of the willing. It will take us some time to truly analyze the coalition, which the President spokesman, and the Secretary of Defense have all said is larger than that going into the Gulf War, because we do not have an absolute handle at the moment on how willing and where. Though we know that coming into this war, there was a very significant portion of international public opinion that was opposed to the war. But the President and his staff saying at the moment that this coalition of people eager to support the United States on this mission is growing almost by the hour to listen to them. This is ABC News continuing live coverage of war with Iraq. I'm Peter Jennings at ABC News headquarters again. Our continuing coverage, as I said, of the war with Iraq, which has begun in earnest, if not in full, with attacks across the southern frontier from Kuwait into Iraq, with cruise missile attacks on targets both of opportunity and long-planned targets in Baghdad. Tremendous pressure being exerted, pressure being exerted at the moment on the Iraqi leadership, with tremendous pressure, we are told, yet to come. There have been some minor incidents, but no American casualties that we are aware of at the moment. There was an American helicopter that went down in the western desert earlier today. That crew was all rescued and the helicopter destroyed on the ground by American forces. There was a Pave-Low helicopter, and that was a Pave-Low. That was a sort of carrying utility helicopter carrying special forces in, often used by the special forces. And there was an Apache attack helicopter that went down, but apparently only briefly, according to Ted Koppel, when it went across the frontier into southern Iraq with the army just several hours ago, and they got it apparently up and going again. The town of Qasr on the Shatt al-Arab, small Iraqi oil port at the top of the waterway that gives Iraq its access to the sea, has been captured. We do not know whether it's been captured, at least I don't know, I should say, whether it's been captured by American or by British forces. They both went up that eastern corridor, so we don't know precisely who's across the frontier and who is not. But there was some talk before the campaign that as the Americans bypassed these significant towns in the south, particularly Basra, which is the largest Iraqi town in the city, just north of Qasr, that the British would be left in charge of those cities, but we don't know that at the moment. And as we talk to our various reporters on the perimeter, not much happening on the northern frontier at the moment. Two of our reporters say it's fairly quiet up there, where it's the eve of the Kurdish New Year. Kurds and Turks making everybody nervous. On the Jordanian frontier, there's no great sign of people coming across. There's no great movement of refugees at the moment, which is a good thing on the Jordanian side because they're not completely ready to handle refugees at the moment. But ABC's David Wright said the border was fairly quiet and a number of people were going back in. It was similarly reported on the Syrian-Iraqi border that some Iraqis were going back in, weren't altogether sure or why, and there were some signs of better off Iraqis getting out and going to the northwest, a couple hundred miles up, to take refuge from the war in Syria. We're told, among other things, in terms of just latest developments here, that from Martha Raddatz just a moment ago, that perhaps Saddam Hussein and his family was in bed sleeping at the time of the U.S. bombing. No confirmation of that. U.S. forces have taken, as I said, Qasr. We don't know what else. It was, everybody believes, Saddam Hussein on television in Iraq earlier today speaking to his people, and it was, we believe, recorded after the attack, but that's all we know, and it was fairly rhetorical in terms of him rallying his people. But we keep getting these bits and pieces from the American intelligence community via our reporters that the pressure on the command structure, both on the military and on the political, appears to have them anxious, wavering. I'm not sure exactly what the precise phrase is or really how serious it is. Let's go to the White House. ABC's Terry Moran. Terry, tell us a little more about what's happening there in and around the cabinet meeting.
Well, Peter, this is command central in some ways at a political level, not at a military level. Although the president is being kept apprised of all the military developments that you've just described, his real job, aides say, is to look ahead to the next steps where presidential decision-making will be required. And chief among those, in many ways, is that very delicate, as you rightly put it, situation up in the north of Iraq that Deb Amos was describing. Vice President Cheney, we are told, has been working that situation for a long time. I was told that the Turks' negotiating position throughout this delicate negotiation with them about using Turkish airspace was that they wanted a coordination, and they didn't want to be under the command of an American military officer. The White House has been saying for some time that all troops in the theater of operations must be under the coalition command structure, and now it seems like it's still unresolved. That's one big problem he has. And then there are others. What is happening to the Iraqi leadership? Not just did the United States kill Saddam Hussein last night, but these senses and these indications that Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld has said that maybe that leadership is cracking. That will require presidential decision-making as well as the question of amnesty, leniency, and what to do with these units if they fall down and surrender as that takes place.
Terry, help us with one thing. I don't think I'm the only person to notice this, and that is the real emphasis on the coalition of the willing and the enumeration. It's very different, this coalition of the willing, compared to the coalition of the participants.
Well, it is, certainly at the ground combat level. There's no question about that. There are only 3 countries participating in ground combat. But what you hear in the White House as they talk about this coalition of the willing, they're fighting back. They are fighting back against this argument that is being launched at them by governments around the world, as well as by many people in the streets around the world, that the United States is acting unilaterally. And you heard Ari Fleischer saying, hardly. The 35-plus nations in this coalition of the willing represent 1.8 billion people. Now, a lot of that is overflight rights, perhaps picking up some slack for the American military as they shift resources into the Persian Gulf. But, Peter, there was one thing the president said last night that nations around the world will pay very close attention to. He said that the nations in this coalition of the willing will share in the honor and the responsibility of defending freedom. There's a lot of question around the world. What will the United States do in big security issues going forward now that the United States has left the United Nations to do this?
Well, Tara, the United States hasn't left the United Nations to start with, and there was a lot of muscle used by the U.S. on a variety of countries beforehand. Isn't another, at least relevant question, these people will judge the United States in some measure depending on how successful the war is?
No question about it, Peter. For weeks, I have been hearing from senior officials, victory is our best argument. There has been almost, it seems, an over-reliance on the prospect that victory will answer all of the arguments that the opponents of the Bush administration policy concerning Iraq have raised. The president is an executive by training, by education, and by style, and he likes to think, as he said last night, decisive action that produces positive results quickly will win converts. That's the theory of this war politically.
Thanks, Terry, very much. Terry Moran, our White House correspondent. One photograph from last night will give you some sense of the energy in the White House. There, from right across, of course, Andy Card, the president's White House chief of staff, the president, George Tenet, the CIA director, who we're told for a while today was very enthusiastic about the possibility that Saddam Hussein himself had been attacked, and his back to us, Vice President Dick Cheney, who has been even more influential in the formulation of policy for this campaign against Iraq than many people in the public arena thought. Speaking of people in the public arena, it's a pleasure to see Dr. Hans Blick in person. I haven't seen you since Baghdad. Just to confirm, all of the people are out of Baghdad now safely and soundly.
Yes, we had 134 people for the IEA and UNMOVIC. They're all taken out. They went to Larnaca in Cyprus.
And I'm not quite sure exactly how to ask the question, but war in some way marks you as, not personally perhaps, it marks you as having been a failure. I say that as politely as I can. Yeah.
I hear that.
Yeah.
No, I think that's wrong. I think that we have shown over these months that we were able to set up an effective international inspection force that reported directly to the UN Security Council, and that was respectable. However, we did not find any weapons of mass destruction. They may be there. Our analysis shows that it's possible, but our analysis do not show that, that they necessarily have it. So we will all like to have certainty about that. And now that we have gone out and the US is going in, we do hope that the specialists who the United States are bringing, that they will bring clarity about it.
And who are some of the specialists the U.S. will take in?
Well, I don't know. I have not been introduced to them, but I think some of them probably worked together with UNSCOM in the past.
The earlier investigation, yeah.
And they will have one advantage over us, perhaps several, but one is clearly that people whom they interview will dare to speak their mind, whereas people who we have interviewed might well have been scripted by the regime.
As you got to the final stages of your mission, and it appeared that Iraqi scientists were at least talking to you more readily, did you have a feeling that they were still completely unable to speak their minds?
No, in many cases they wanted to have some Iraqi representative present, and we took it that meant that they wanted to show to the regime that they said nothing that was against the statements of the regime. But I don't think that we could take note or make sure that they were lying. No, we did not have evidence of that.
All the time that your organization, UNMOVIC, that you ran, was in looking for weapons, many of the analysts on television were members of the previous inspection regimes. And there was sometimes a feeling that they always knew better than you. How did you feel about that?
I think there was a certain envy among them that they were not part of the new team. But the reality was that the Security Council in 1999 felt that UNSCOM, the former regime, that it was discredited. It had such close relations with intelligence organizations. It was not seen as an independent UN organization. And I even asked me today that suppose that we had had such two-way traffic with intelligence, would we not then today have been seen as a forerunner, as someone helped to prepare for the invasion? And that is not good for the Security Council. I think we should be seen as a UN entity, and I think we were.
There are a great many people in the world, governments and individuals as well, who thought that your effort was in fact the way to go, that war was not the way to go. When you got right down to it at the end, how really good a job did you think you were doing? How much farther did you think you had to go?
Well, I think that the analysis that we had made was quite good. I think that the access was far better than UNSCOM had in the past. However, and we did also destroy quite a lot of missiles, over 70 of these Al-Samud missiles. However, I have to note that we did not find any weapons of mass destruction, whether anthrax or VX. We did find some chemical weapons, warhead that didn't contain any chemicals any longer, but we did not find that. And the big question now for me is, will the US specialists find it? Or is it empty or practically empty? Some people think that they have a jumpstart capacity. Some intelligence agents are quite convinced that they have hidden things there. And we will be curious to see that's true.
If you were, are you in a position now to tell US forces going in that they should be looking at things that you didn't fully look at?
No, I think that they will probably be aware of quite as many sites as we were. We went to a great many sites, and I understand that the US forces have the location of great many sites where they should go. So I don't think, they haven't asked us.
No, I appreciate that. And did you feel during your mission that you got full cooperation from the United States and other countries in terms of intelligence?
Yes, I think that in December, January, especially in January, we got a good deal of intelligence from the US and from other states. And we did go to a great many sites. However, I must admit that there were very few of these sites where really gave results, a couple of them.
Now, I know you're a man of precision. In other words, you do indeed, and you don't like to say anything that isn't on the paper or supported by the facts, but I want to ask you one instinct question.
Please.
Having been through everything you've been through, do you think there are weapons of mass destruction somewhere in Iraq?
Well, judging by the intelligence, and they are people whom I admire a lot, they put their lives at stake from time to time, I would say that, yes, they overhear conversations, they look at procurement, etc. It would be strange if they did not have it. On the other hand, seeing the Iraqi conduct, when they have been almost frantic lately in showering us with letters and explanations and explorations of how do you dig up, measure anthrax in the ground, etc., it's puzzling. Of course, there's only been one truth at any given time in Iraq, and that's the one set by Saddam Hussein.
That's a very good point. Please don't go away. I have one more question to ask you, but I want to go to the Gulf at the moment because ABC's Ted Koppel, who is with the Army, is able to talk to us again. Ted?
Well, good morning, Peter. I know this looks overly dramatic on the night scope, but they are under light discipline here, which means that you can't even use a regular flashlight. So night scope it is. I want you just to take a look at some video that we shot literally about an hour and a half ago. This is video of 155 millimeter artillery shooting into Iraq. I was telling you about it earlier when you and I were on the phone. This is the artillery fire that's being directed against some of the observation posts on the other side of the border. The Army has one of those wonderfully Pentagon-like euphemisms for what they are doing now, both with artillery and with rocket fire and with longbow Apache helicopters. They are shaping the environment, is the way they put it. Basically, what they're trying to do is knock out as much of any potential opposition as they can, so that when this land invasion begins, they will meet as little opposition when those 20,000 troops go across the border as is humanly possible.
Are you wearing part of your chemical suit at the moment, and are the soldiers with you still in theirs?
Oh yes, we are all actually the pants and the jacket, and if you want to see the hood, I can give you the hood too. The hood actually goes over the, well, I can't because I've got the earpiece in, and I won't be able to hear you, Peter, if I put the hood up. But yes, this is considered Mop 1, and then I've got a flak vest on top of it. At this time of night, the desert, as you know, is cold. At this time of night, it's actually quite comfortable. Once the temperature starts to rise in the desert, what this mop suit does for you is it raises your body temperature by anywhere from 20 to 40 degrees. So when it's 85 degrees during the day, your body temperature goes up to about, 115, 120.
Ted, you have one advantage from an infantryman, is that having access to the commander, I think you're able to see the battlefield in a far larger way than the average infantryman, can you? Do you have a sense tonight of the overall battlefield in the south, or the overall line of departure as you go across it, and can you tell us what you know about it?
Well, one of the most extraordinary things when you talk about the kind of overview that these commanders here have, there has never been a war quite like it, because they have rolling command posts with them, which are equipped with computers and with video screens on which they are capable, quite literally, just by touching their fingers or touching a stylus to the screen, they are able to call up not only the positions of their own men, but the positions of enemy forces. All of this is on the basis of both satellite photographs and U-2 photographs, and whatever intelligence they have is all put into put onto these computer screens, so that even as they are rolling into battle, they have an overview of the entire battlefield. As I say, there's never been anything quite like it.
You made a reference to enemy forces. Can you tell what the disposition is of enemy forces on the other side of the border, and whether or not, at least in numerical terms, the resistance will be stiff or light or non-existent?
Actually, they're not expecting a whole lot of resistance as they roll across the border, but it is a particularly vulnerable time and point, as you can imagine, Peter, even though they are going through multiple entry points into Iraq, or will be. They're going to have to move 20,000 troops and about 10,000 vehicles. It's going to take them 24 hours just to do that. That is a time when they are susceptible, of course, to enemy attack. But their expectation is that for the first couple of days, they will meet relatively minor resistance indeed as they move toward their first target, and I'm not in a position to tell you what that is, but as they move toward it, their expectation is that they may actually receive the surrender of the regular Army division that is defending that particular town.
My apologies. There was some reporting earlier that that Iraqis had been down close to the border laying mines. Are you aware of that?
That's to be expected, but here too we'll see how well the military technology functions. I'll have to try and draw you a word picture of it. They have these massive trucks, and if you can imagine on the back of them, it is almost like an automatic catapult, but instead of catapulting stones as they would have done in the old days, these catapults catapult hundreds of bomblets which explode on the terrain in front of them, thereby setting off any mines that may be laid. And those will be followed then by these massive plows and military plows, which are going to clear any bombs that may still remain, so that by the time the tanks and the armored personnel carriers and the other vehicles come through, those minefields should not be a problem.
Unless you have anything else to add, we'll let you try to get some sleep. It's now almost midnight your time. Anything to add?
Just that the hood of our Land Rover is still nice and warm from the engine, and that's where I'm going to be sleeping. So
Okay.
I'll see you tomorrow, Peter.
Thanks, Ted. Come back anytime. Ted Koppel, who is with the 3rd Infantry, very close to the line of departure and giving us the real sense. There's a real energy, of course, in the coverage today because little things have happened, but he points out so aptly that it takes 24 hours to get these huge numbers of men and equipment moving. And so while the pressure is on the president to have a quick war, and everybody wants to have a quick war, and people begin to imagine this mad dash all the way from the Kuwaiti border all the way up to Baghdad, it isn't that easy, and the great danger going too fast, of course, is to run away from your fuel trucks. A couple more questions for you, Dr. Blix. What was it like to be in Baghdad when you knew that your mission was coming to an end and you all had to leave? Did you ever have any doubts about getting out safely?
I was not in Baghdad, in fact,
sorry.
because
I
I'm
met your
in
people, yeah.
charge
Right.
here in New York and the relations with the Security Council. But of course, it was one of the greatest reliefs I've had that there was no problem in bringing our people out.
Did you anticipate that there might be?
Well, there was also fear. I mean, I'm responsible for them, and there was fear that there could be hostage taking. That's happened in the past once. I didn't think it was very likely because I think that the Iraqis would worry about their reputation, such as it is. They, after all, they feel as if they were the aggrieved party, and they know that if they were to take hostages, and they know still that if they were to use chemical weapons, that attitude in the world, the support or the sympathy that they have had will be gone immediately, and everybody will say, well, this war is totally justified.
You had a huge amount of experience with the Iraqis. Did you ever think you knew Saddam Hussein at all?
No, we never met him, and I think that he probably figures himself as a sort of emperor of Mesopotamia, and that he would not descend to talk to lowly creatures like a chief inspector.
And so you never felt in this entire procedure, through all of his other people, that you ever got inside his mind?
We don't know how much he's being told. We saw the Vice President Ramadan a couple of times and had long talks with him, but how much really transpires to Saddam Hussein, we don't know. The people we negotiate with are very high-level intellectuals, and no propaganda. They knew what leverage was, but no propaganda.
I've always been fascinated. I mean, I could keep you for a long time and I won't, but always been fascinated by, in some respects, your opposite number, who is the weapons man for the Iraqi government. Very sophisticated man, and I wonder what will become of him. Any thoughts?
I wonder myself. He was an excellent party to discuss with. He knew precisely where his leverage was, and he knew where our leverage was as well. And it was a very practical discussion that we had, and we did manage to reach results on a number of points, but on the chief point, whether they had any weapons, no, we did not come to conclusions.
And the ultimate thing I've heard you say, you've been very helpful, I'm very glad you can be very helpful to us, by the way, during your whole mission. I much appreciate it. But you said finally, and I gather you believe it really firmly, there's only one truth in Iraq up until now, and that is Saddam Hussein's truth.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Blix. I appreciate you coming in. Dr. Hans Blix, Chief Weapons Inspector, clearly one of the best-known personalities in the world today. I'm going to go and do some other work at 3:30 Eastern Time, a little afternoon out in the West at the moment. My colleague Charles Gibson is going to continue here for a while, and we shall be back at a later hour. Many thanks for joining us. Our coverage continues. In the meantime, just to bring you up to date as best we can with what's been going on throughout the day, here's ABC's Bob Brown.
After last night's opening volley of missiles into Baghdad, the first news today involved episode after episode of gas scares in Kuwait City and among coalition military units near the border as the Iraqis lobbed their own missiles south. 2 were intercepted and destroyed by U.S. Patriot 3 missiles, according to the Pentagon, and there were no known casualties in what seemed to be a nervous prelude to the intense fighting everyone knew was coming. Kuwait television reported that some oil wells near the southern city of Basra may have been set on fire, a report that was denied by the Iraqi oil minister. In the meantime, demonstrations in Egypt and Syria protested the beginning of a war and demanded that U.S. ambassadors be expelled from both countries. Riot police used water cannons against protesters in the city center and near the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. There was some question as to whether the military responses by Iraqis today might force the coalition forces into speeding up their plans for the invasion of Iraq. Shortly after evening prayers in Baghdad, questions of what the next response would be were answered. Cruise missiles again struck sites in Baghdad shortly after 9 p.m. Baghdad time. First reports indicated that the targets were government buildings on the west side of the Tigris River. There was heavy damage, but military experts still say they don't think this is the big attack that is expected.
Bob Brown reporting on a summation of where we are so far. But we really want to continue this by turning back to John McWethy, our ABC News correspondent at the Pentagon. We have not talked to John for a while, and it's probably a pretty good time to get some summation as to where we stand. John, do you hear me?
I hear you, Charlie.
All right, let me come back to where we are in terms of the attacks that have occurred on Baghdad tonight. Not last night, but tonight, it now being, 11:30 p.m. Baghdad time. We have seen some air attacks, cruise missile attacks, we understand, on sites in Baghdad. But we understand these are not targets of opportunity, as they were referred to last night when these attacks occurred, but that these were planned attacks. But it doesn't seem to me that they have come in the volume that we were warned the first attacks would be.
Part of the wonder of the way they are organizing this campaign is that it is not unfolding the way that we journalists had been describing it. While everyone has waited for a massive attack on Baghdad, that has not yet happened. Although Defense Secretary Rumsfeld today promised it, and we are told tomorrow night it may well come. What they've been doing, officials acknowledge, is using cruise missiles, not manned aircraft, because they are concerned about having planes shot down in the intense air defense environment around Baghdad. These cruise missiles are striking what they are describing as leadership targets. These are places where the leadership of Iraq have been known to work. There is not great hope that they're going to find too many people home, but when these leaders return to their offices, there will be no offices. So they are working not only to try to kill some of these individuals, but they are trying to plant in their mind that the U.S. is going to track them and go after them. And they are also working on the people who work for the leaders, trying to get them to either defect, perhaps turn on the leadership, or at the very least not resist as much as the U.S. fears they might.
I'm curious about a couple of things you said there, John. Number one, as far as we know, these are government ministries that are being attacked. It's difficult to tell through some of the smoke which buildings are being hit, but we understand these are government ministries that have been hit, some of which have been afire. But if it is too dangerous for manned aircraft to come into that area, therefore they're using the cruise missiles, it would seem to me somewhat logical, not a military man, but somewhat logical, that they would actually try to hit the anti-aircraft batteries to take those out and give them greater control of the skies over Baghdad itself. I guess I'm asking for an opinion, but do you have some sense as to why they don't do that?
You have to think of this as coming in waves, Charlie. If you look at the extreme southern part of Iraq, the United States is cleaning up in that southern area that used to be called the no-fly zone. They are trying to remove Iraq's ability to see aircraft coming and to anticipate their arrival in the Baghdad area. Once you blind that distant radar capability and the ability to communicate it back to Baghdad, then you can arrive in the vicinity of Baghdad and go after what is called the integrated air defense around that city. So they are working at the distant margins, and they are working their way toward Baghdad, where U.S. officials say they are definitely going to take on this air defense system, and they're going to take it on with a vengeance.
Now, we have heard, you mentioned what may be going on in the southern no-fly zone, south of the 33rd parallel there in Iraq. That is the area that we have patrolled for so many years now, but obviously the mission of planes over the southern no-fly zone having changed in the last few hours. We heard there were planes taking off in surges from the aircraft carriers that are in the Persian Gulf, 3 carriers that are there located in the Persian Gulf. And that is their mission, to take care of those targets in the southern no-fly zone that you're talking about?
Yes, they are, but it's a very broad suite of potential targets. There is a whole part of the Iraqi landscape that we have not really addressed today at all, and that is the Western Desert. There are things happening there, I can guarantee you, that we do not yet know about. Quite likely, American Special Forces out there have captured an airfield. That is part of the plan, but as yet the U.S. is not acknowledging that effort. Therefore, there is going to be intense air cover out in that part of the desert as they look for potential Scud missiles that could be fired at Israel, and they provide cover for the Special Forces operation there. There are also things happening in the northern part of Iraq that we undoubtedly do not yet know about, and this is more special operations activity. In addition to that, there have been a lot of special operations forces now going across the border into the southern part of Iraq. The first major target that the U.S. is probably going to go after is the port city of Basra. This is going to become the first real test of whether or not Iraqi forces are going to resist.
Now, mentioning that move toward Basra, because there was a general expectation that Marines would go in that division to try to secure Basra and the oil fields that are around there, and that Army troops would go more to the west and move up the Safwan Highway and through the desert toward Baghdad. We heard from Mike Saray earlier, who was with a Marine Expeditionary Unit, that he was actually inside Kuwait and moving forward. But in talking to Ted Koppel just a few moments ago, the 3rd Infantry Division is still not across the line, it would seem, and that may come a bit later. Do you have any timetable as to when the troops move across the border?
Without being too specific, I think it's pretty safe to say when the sun comes up, the offensive on the ground is probably going to begin in a very large way. The troops are now taking advantage of a few hours of rest. They have done some of the softening up that's on the Iraqi side of the demilitarized zone, and I expect you're going to see a massive movement in the daylight hours tomorrow.
Just one more question, John, and then I'll let you go. You mentioned the heavy air bombardment, and you used the words that it would come tomorrow night. I wonder if that is conjecture or if that's with some certainty, whether this is in effect a holding action that we've seen these cruise missiles hitting Baghdad tonight, and the heavy attack, the so-called shock and awe, or what General Myers, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, said would be such a large concerted attack that the Iraqi regime would know that there was not much purpose in resisting. That comes tomorrow night, or it being only 11:33 now in Baghdad and there is still plenty of darkness hours, might it come tonight?
Charlie, I am one reporter who has been chastened mightily because I predicted that all of this was going to begin on Friday, and lo and behold, it began last night. I hate to be in the predicting business. I think it is quite likely that the heavy air attack in the Baghdad area could be tomorrow night. It could be the night after that. They like the darkness hours, and the night is halfway finished. But they're arriving at prime time right now for manned air operations. They really like the hours after midnight and before dawn. This is the time when there are fewer civilians on the street, when a person's natural biorhythms are at their lowest and they are least responsive. It's the time that they prefer to do heavy bombing when they have to do it.
All right, John McWethy at the Pentagon, I appreciate bringing us up to date, giving us a sort of overview as to where things stand now. I appreciate it, and you can stand down for a while. We'll come back to you a little bit later. I want to turn to two voices in Washington. Voices, one very prominent now, one who was a major force in the House of Representatives in the past and still speaks with great authority when talking about issues of foreign policy, joined by Senator Pat Roberts, a Republican of Kansas, who was chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, joins us on Capitol Hill. And I believe we also have with us Lee Hamilton, who is a former Democratic congressman from Indiana, former head of the House Foreign Relations Committee, currently director of the Woodrow Wilson Center, and vice chairman of the panel that is investigating the 9/11 incident. I appreciate both of you being with us. Senator Roberts, I know there's been a resolution in front of the Senate today and some discussion overall about the situation, but a number of your fellow members have come forward and say this is really not a debate. This is not time for debate right now in Washington.
No, this is a statement by every member of Congress, Senate, House, Republican, Democrat, one independent, or maybe two independents, to really state our resolve and our commitment in behalf of our men and women in uniform. There's no politics attached to this. This is a time that we're united. And we all agree with that.
But there are deep reservations, I know, on the part of many members of the Senate, not specific, well, in some cases specifically to what has been done, in some cases in a rather more general sense as to the way the United States is changing its posture vis-a-vis the rest of the world. And those reservations have been, as they used to say in a situation comedy on television, stifled for the moment.
Well, I'm not sure they're ever stifled in the Senate of the United States, and there are concerns on the part of everybody. If you win, what do you win? What do you do? What's going to happen with Reconstruction? What does the policy of preemption really mean to our national security policy, our foreign policy, the transition in the military? These are very, very tough questions. We're just going through that. I would expect some good, honest debate as to where we are, but right now we're behind the troops. I think when we get to the Reconstruction effort and we get past this particular phase, we will enter into that debate again, and I think it's appropriate.
Do you think that there has been sufficient debate on that issue? The administration, it was back in September of last year, issued really what was a very important foreign policy document talking about the right of preemptive strikes of this country and what they called anticipatory self-defense. Do you think that was debated enough in the United States Senate and that there was really enough of a national debate on this as an overall U.S. policy? Or do you think we came late to that and the administration had moved past that by the time the rest of the nation began to engage in that debate?
I think the events of 9/11 changed everything. We used to, in the Emerging Threats Subcommittee on Armed Services and in the Intelligence Committee, keep talking about the post-Cold War period. We didn't know what else to call it. And we relied on detection and deterrence, and then in the worst-case scenario, something called consequence management. And then all of a sudden, the word preemption, got in there. So now we're on detection through our intelligence community and our unprecedented assets there. And by the way, we're doing a lot better job since 9/11, without question. And then into preemption, and then deterrence, and then consequence management. But it's a very far-reaching policy, and obviously some of our allies do not agree with it, and they wonder where we're headed. I think in the Reconstruction process, you're going to see both France and Germany come back in the fold. They are present right now in Afghanistan. 23 nations are present in Afghanistan. We're making progress there. I would guess that probably Iraq's going to be Afghanistan times 50. And so consequently, I think there's enough time to put this back together. And under NATO and other alliances and the Transatlantic Alliance, really discuss what does preemption mean in this postmodern world.
All right, let me ask you to stand by for just a moment, Senator, because I want to turn to Congressman Hamilton, who was there. And Congressman, I saw a quote from you. You said, I understand that you felt the missile strikes last night were a foreign policy failure. Would you explain that?
No, that was not a quote from me.
I take it all back then.
I did not make any quotation with regard to the military action in Iraq.
What is your general feeling about the question that I was just discussing with Senator Roberts, that there is a basic, very basic change that really was enunciated last September in American foreign policy that is at play here, and the rationale behind this war, and that there may not be a basic sense in the country, and maybe even in parts of official Washington, as to how profoundly things have changed?
Well, first, I think the so-called doctrine of preemption, which was very prominent in that strategic statement by the president, is not new. I don't know of any American president in recent decades who would not use military force if they felt there were an imminent strike against the United States. I think the Bush administration has articulated that more strongly, made it more prominent, stated it more forcefully than we've done in the past. Secondly, I believe that Congress has been unusually timid in all of its discussions here. The resolution that was passed some months ago turned over, in effect, the authority of the Congress to the President and said, Mr. President, you handle it from here. We'll keep an eye on it, but you make all the key decisions. That really falls into line with congressional actions in the past, when more and more the Congress has deferred for a lot of different reasons power to the President. And third, I would say that the doctrine of preemption and where we go from here after Iraq are very important questions. They should be debated in the public forum, including the Congress of the United States. Much of the world is asking who's next. That's a fair question, and I think the United States and its people need to understand better just what the long-term impact of the doctrine of preemption may be, the defeat of Iraq, and what follows that.
Congressman, just before I let you go, though, you used the word timid on the part of the United States Congress. Do you feel your former colleagues in the Democratic Party are the ones particularly at fault there for being, quote, too timid?
I've just been impressed by the fact that as we've had this lead up to the war, when Iraq has just dominated the American agenda, and when the whole attention, not just of the country, but of the world, has been turned on Iraq, if you look at the actual agenda of the United States Congress, in the Senate and in the House, they are not debating Iraq and have not been debating Iraq for weeks. There just seems to me a kind of an incongruity there that doesn't quite fit. So you have to ask yourself the question, I ask myself the question, what really should the role of the Congress be in all of this? Senator Roberts said a moment ago, and I think quite correctly, that in a few days here, as the war settles down, and we hope victoriously, the Congress will take these questions up again and debate them seriously. The resolution, of course, that's on the floor now to support the troops is an important resolution, but it's not really a debate about the policy of the United States.
It is a resolution that I think everyone now, as a number of the senators have said, everyone rallies around the troops no matter what their differences may be on foreign policy, and it is a resolution, obviously, that will pass, if not, well, it'll pass unanimously, I would suspect. Congressman Hamilton, thanks very much. Good to have you and Senator Roberts with us. Want to turn to ABC's Pierre Thomas, who reports for us from the Justice Department. And the Justice Department, we understand, is now about to put out a wanted bulletin on an al-Qaeda operative who is being compared now, we have not heard this name much, but is now being compared to Mohammed Atta, the person who is generally credited, or not credited is the word, but is generally held responsible for being the lead actor of the 19 who were involved in hijacking the 4 planes on September 11th, 2001. This is a new wanted advisory that is being put out by the Justice Department. Pierre has the details on it. Pierre?
Charlie, they just put out this bulletin. His name is Adnan al-Shukri Juma. He is described as 27 years old, a Saudi Arabian national. And as you said, he is described as a Mohammed Atta-like figure. He's also believed to be a pilot. The FBI does not know where he is, although they think he might have entered the country after 9/11. But right now they have no idea where he is. He's believed to be an al-Qaeda operative, someone who might be planning attacks. Those are the details we have thus far.
What put them on to him?
We're trying to get information about that. They recently got this intelligence that he was a known al-Qaeda operative, someone who might be plotting attacks. And again, the problem that they have is that they don't know whether he's in the United States or elsewhere.
Do we know if he has been in the United States?
again, there is some information that he might have been in the country shortly after the 9/11 attacks. And again, they're now trying to trace his whereabouts from that particular time.
All right, thanks, Pierre Thomas, who is joining us from the Justice Department. Just a couple of notes. We were talking earlier with John McWethy at the Pentagon about the launch of cruise missiles, the attack on Baghdad that has come tonight. And we have seen sporadic fire and explosions over Baghdad, and we have seen some ministry buildings on fire there. We understand that these cruise missiles launched today, so far tonight, and again, it is just before midnight over there, that they were launched by 3 U.S. vessels and 2 British vessels. All of the cruise missiles that were launched last night came from 6 American ships in the Persian Gulf and in the Red Sea. There were no British ships involved, but today we are told that British ships were involved in the launching of the cruise missiles that have come down on Baghdad tonight. We're going to go now to Mike Van Fremd, who is joining us in Kuwait City, who has had can give us some sense of what has been going on there. It was early in the day that the sirens were sounding almost continuously in Kuwait City, and so many people there were having to head for shelter and put on the gas masks. And Mike, have things been quiet once the darkness has come in Kuwait City?
They've been very fortunate, Charlie. For about the past 5 hours, we have not had any more siren sound. Now, there had been 6 alarms that had gone off during the day, and it really was very unnerving. Now, there is one thing that's been going on tonight. The Crown Prince, I don't know whether the camera can capture it, but it's a enormous building in back of me, has been meeting with the cabinet. They've been trying to discuss what to do now. They had really thought that Kuwait City was going to be pretty safe through all this, with the tremendous patriots to the north, the enormous number of troops, U.S. and British troops. They didn't think this was going to happen. So far, what they've decided to do isn't much. Basically, they're going to cancel school beginning on Saturday for a week. Of course, tomorrow, Friday, is a Muslim holy day. Saturday is when school starts. It's going to stop for a week. During the day, it really began to become frantic here sometime afternoon, Charlie. That was about 3 a.m. New York time. It was when the Kuwaiti Defense Ministry first said that there had been 2 missiles from Iraq that had landed on Kuwaiti soil. It was after that we began to get those sirens, and journalists were frantically throwing on their gas masks. They were getting into shelters. Traffic stopped here, and it was really unnerving because it would go one after the other. We had a total of 6 of them. One interesting thing that I was able to see from my vantage point, but we weren't able to catch many pictures of, the Czechs have a very sophisticated number of armored personnel carriers that travel around the city that can basically sniff out and detect whether there's any chemical or biological agents. We met with some of these specialists, and they are people that are wearing gas masks. They have special suits. They have special tanks, and they can find anything that's in the air. It's extremely sensitive equipment, and the Czechs learned their trade during the days when they were part of the old Soviet Union. They had great expertise in dealing with that, and they are now going throughout the city, and it's sort of an unnerving sight in and of itself, because when you see one of these armored personnel carriers come into a residential neighborhood in Kuwait to basically sniff out whether there's chemical or biological agents, it makes people very frightened here. Another thing that did happen, the city of Kuwait has 800,000 Kuwaitis and about 2 million foreign workers. Many of them wanted to go to the telephone and make calls, and also, Charlie, all the journalists here were frantically getting on the phone, and the phone system then crashed, so it made matters a little bit more worse and an unnerving day. But the bottom line of all this is that the missiles that came in there was no damage. It really didn't amount to much, but psychologically for this city that thought really not much was going to happen, it has been a very unnerving day.
Well, a couple of things. As I look at those pictures that we were seeing of people putting on gas masks, I must say I recognize where those pictures were shot, and I even recognize some of the faces behind the gas masks. Those are ABC staffers who are at the offices that we have there in Kuwait City. But Mike, as I watched the pictures from Kuwait City today, I was struck by the fact that people were heading for the shelters, and then as soon as the all-clear sign, as I saw pictures from Kuwait City, people were just heading back out on the street. Car traffic was going as normal. Sirens would go off again. Everybody would stop, and then it just it resumed as if it was people were pausing for this announcement from the sirens, and then coming right back out.
I guess they took it in stride, although I would differ with you just a little bit, Charlie. The traffic seemed a bit lighter today. It seemed that once it happened, many of the workers, I mean, this is a pretty bustling little area. You were here just a little while ago. These streets today wasn't much going on. I'll tell you what it reminded me a lot of, though. It reminded me of Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, some 12 years ago. And the way the pattern went then was the very first day that you began to get these sirens go off, people would put on their entire suits, they would put on their masks, they'd go to the shelter. And then by about the third or fourth time, you begin to say, well, am I really going to go down and do that? I guess I'll just keep my mask with me. A lot of people watch the birds flying around because if you see birds dropping, that's a pretty good sign that you might want to put your mask on. But if this city is about 40 miles from the border, we really didn't think that much was going to be threatening, and it was unnerving today. Charlie?
All right, Mike Von Frem, thanks very much in Kuwait City. Right there at the ABC headquarters. As I went to Mike, by the way, I should mention that you were looking at some pictures that I didn't explain. Those are B-52s at the Royal Air Force Base in Fairford in the United Kingdom, in England. And they are being loaded with bombs, and they are on the runway now. We have not seen them taking off, but there has been some activity of those planes moving around and being loaded with bombs that I think it is fair to say are not the kinds of precision instruments that we have heard so much about. When the B-52s were bombing, for instance, in Afghanistan, those were cluster bombs that were falling. I don't know what kind of ordnance they have been loaded with there in England, but we are watching them and watching the activity with those planes. Now again, a live picture of Baghdad, and once again you are hearing sirens in Baghdad. This is live of our camera, positioned across the Tigris River, looking east into Baghdad, and the sirens are sounding there again. If there is any activity, we will show that to you in just a few moments. I want to bring in John Hillen, who is with us from down in Washington, D.C. John is a defense analyst in Washington and a former U.S. Special Operations Officer, U.S. Army captain who served in the Gulf War. And one thing, John, there were reports of 2 helicopters now that have been lost in this day of activity, and I wanted to ask you about that. One was a special operations a chopper that we understand went down before the first attack that came about 9 o'clock Eastern time last night. And another was an Apache chopper that was brought down just across the line between Kuwait and Iraq, brought down, we understand, by small arms fire. In both cases, the crews were able to get out and were rescued and are all right. In one case, the chopper in the Special Operations Division, we understand, had to be destroyed by the crew so that the Iraqis would not get their hands on it. But this is obviously a little dispiriting, I would suspect.
Well, Charlie, I think what it's evidence of is there's a pretty vigorous special operations campaign going on. We've known now that Special Operations Forces and CIA forces have been working with Kurdish guerrillas and perhaps even Shiite guerrillas in Iraq in preparation for a campaign against Saddam Hussein. But now we're starting to see more of what we refer to in the Special Operations community as direct action. So I think we can expect that Special Operations Forces will be going in and out of Iraq, looking for Scuds, trying to prevent perhaps the launch of a Scud against Israel, looking to secure weapons of mass destruction sites, putting in reconnaissance teams to look at very important areas and keep eyes on key objectives. So there's going to be a lot of this activity, and I think we can expect to lose a helicopter or 2. And from reports, I think the Special Operations chopper just went down because of mechanical problems, and we decided to destroy it. It's got very sensitive, very classified avionics on board, and that's probably the best measure.
John, I've been fascinated by reports which have existed now for some weeks and indeed even months that there were Special Operations Forces inside Iraq. You know Special Operations Forces very well. What is your understanding, what is your suspicion of how many we had in there, how many teams, and where they might have been located?
Well, Charlie, one of the principal missions of Special Operations is to teach, and a lot of Americans are only learning that from the Afghan campaign and now this. And the basic idea is that a small team of special operators can make a large number of indigenous forces or guerrilla forces or partisan forces into an effective fighting force by helping them get organized and teaching them how to fight like an effective fighting force. So, for instance, there was a pattern established in Afghanistan where CIA and special operations teams helped the Northern Alliance mobilize, gave them air support, supplies, money, those sorts of things, and help them be very effective in the fight against the Taliban. So I think what you can expect to see and what has been going on over the past couple of months, especially in northern Iraq, is a similar sort of pattern. So we get local allies that can help us in a battle against Saddam Hussein's regime, and they'll be organized by some of our special operations forces and CIA assets.
When you talk about a reconnaissance team from the special ops that are in there, how big is a reconnaissance team?
Charlie, it can be anywhere from just a few men on up to bigger teams. Reconnaissance missions were pretty successful a dozen years ago in the Gulf War. We tended to drop small teams off. They literally dug themselves into the ground at key points, and we had eyes on very key objectives where we could see Iraqi movement or track Scud or weapons of mass destruction sites and things of that nature. I would imagine, given that we had trouble finding the Scuds in the last war throughout that vast western desert, and they were able to fire on Israel a dozen years ago as a result, that we'll probably have bigger teams in there now and probably covering more area.
Would you suspect that there have been a fair number of additional special ops forces inserted in the last 24 hours? And specifically, I'm thinking, you mentioned about preventing Scud missile attacks. There's been a lot of concern about the western desert of Iraq, whether the Iraqis could move missile launchers over toward that area, which obviously is the closest part of Iraq to Israel. So I guess I'm really getting more specific there than I want to. But A, do you think there have been additional special ops forces inserted in the last 24 hours? And B, might they be concentrating on that western desert area?
I think there will be a lot of intelligence assets from satellites to special operations forces concentrating on that. One of the things we know politically is we don't want an attack on Israel to widen this conflict beyond its current scope, which is just the Allied coalition in Iraq. So a matter of grave political concern, and one to which we'll commit a lot of operating forces, including special operations. And then, of course, Charlie, there's another possibility in the western desert that John McWethy already talked about, and that is that we may use special operations forces to secure what we call a lodgment, perhaps an airfield or some other patch, much as we did in southern Afghanistan, which can then become a base for follow-on American forces, because we know that we'll probably have to move forces up to northern Iraq throughout this campaign, and a way to get them there might be to secure an airfield inside Iraq first and then use them to move up that way.
All right, John Hill, and I appreciate your being with us, talking a little bit about the Special Operations Forces, the couple of helicopters that have been lost, and what those Special Ops troops may be doing right now. I want to go to Charles Glass, who I'm delighted to see back with us on ABC, who is in northern Iraq. As you know, there is a northern and a southern no-fly zone over Iraq, and the northern no-fly zone was basically to protect the Iraqi Kurds. Those are people who are in no way enamored of Saddam Hussein, indeed opponents of his regime. And Charles Glass is in that Kurdish-controlled area of northern Iraq, and I gather has got some sense of what is happening now with Iraqi troops that are up in that area. Charles?
Well, one of the things that the Kurdish military here has been saying is that Republican Guard units who had been based around Kirkuk and Mosul, which are the two large oil cities in the north of Iraq that are still in Saddam's hands, have been moved in the last week down nearer to Baghdad for the protection of Baghdad, leaving the north protected only by regular army forces. And I interviewed an Iraqi army deserter who said that most of the men in his unit, he was a mechanic in a tank unit, are ready to surrender to the Americans should they come up here. At the moment, though, there are no American troops up here, and because of disagreements with Turkey, it doesn't look like there is going to be a northern front anytime soon.
All right, Charles, let me interrupt you for just a moment, and I want you to stand by because I want to talk a little bit about that changing relationship with Turkey. But Mike Saray is with us. He has just come back. He's with a Marine Expeditionary Unit that has been heading into Iraq. We talked to him earlier. He was inside Iraq. And Mike, if you can hear me, just tell me what you know.
Yes, Charlie, I can hear you. We crossed into southern Iraq about 2.5 hours ago. We were making very good progress. We just encountered our first tank encounter, an APC encounter. We've exchanged shots. We've been told that we've knocked out 2 tanks. We've been making fairly good progress. This invasion started about 12 hours earlier than it was supposed to because intelligence reports indicated a heavy concentration of enemy tanks passing on the northern border next to one of the units we were supposed to be going in with. The decision was made for us to go right away to try to relieve some pressure on that area. We are, in effect, trying to do a left hook to get up and above that area to take the pressure off of them. We have been in chemical suits now for over 12 hours. We've had 4 gas masks and chemical warnings, so we've had to go to full gas mask and full chemical gear, although there's been no confirmation of any chemical weapons so far. There have been 3 or 4 missile launchings that have made us all don our gear and take cover, and I think those were the incidents that led up to us doing an early invasion. Once they figured we were on the line on the border and started firing missiles, and intelligence indicated that there were tanks up there, the decision was made to go about 12 hours earlier than planned. Charlie?
Mike, I hope you can hear me. When you say we're moving very quickly and have been moving for about 2.5 hours, at what speed are you actually advancing? Because as I hear the sounds of that vehicle, it sounds like you're moving out.
Charlie, I can barely hear you, but I think your question was, how are we moving? We are moving well because we are a little bit left of where, or excuse me, a little bit west of where all the activity was supposed to be. They are sending us in now to try to get around where we think the most concentration is. Charlie?
But my question, Mike, and again, I'll try it one more time, and I perfectly well understand that you can't hear very well, but how fast are you moving?
I would estimate that we're going about 20 miles an hour, which is pretty good speed at night. It is nighttime now, and with all the indications, there's a full moon that's come up now. We're trying to move as quickly as we can before the moon gets too much higher and illuminates our positions. We're having a hard time having the other vehicles keep up with us because they are running into ditches and ravines. They're using their night vision goggles and are moving as quickly as they can. But we are spread out across the desert, all kinds of tanks, armored assault vehicles, and Humvees with anti-tank weaponry on it. So it is a bit of a rush across the desert. Yeah, I look to my left, I look to my right, I can see the shadows of vehicles just in the moonlight. Charlie?
All right, thanks very much, Mike Saray. If you can still hear me, stand by. I do want to say to our local stations that this is ABC News continuing live coverage of the war with Iraq. And I'm Charles Gibson, back at ABC News headquarters in New York. We had contact there with Mike Saray, who was with the Marine Expeditionary Force that moved, as Mike said, into Iraq about 2.5 hours ago, across the border with Kuwait and moving at considerable speed. And Mike, if you've been in there 2.5 hours, moving at 20 miles an hour, is it safe to say that you're more than 40 miles inside Iraq, or can you say?
I cannot give you our location, and I couldn't give you that estimate. I would not say we've been able to maintain that speed throughout. I would say we're considerably short of that. The main thing, though, is we got through, we breached the line, went through the concertina wire, and got through rather quickly and did not get any opposition until just about 15 minutes ago.
All right, thanks very much, Mike Saray, and you come back to us anytime you can, because there's obviously an immediacy to what you're reporting, and we will be receptive to whatever you have to say over the coming hours. I want to turn to Lieutenant General Gregory Newbold, who is with us, obviously a